Well, let's get started. So good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank you for joining us for day 2 of the annual Mayor's Megawatt Challenge Forum. My name is Catherine Wilson, and for those that don't know me, I am the manager of the Mayor's Megawatt Challenge, a program that's been working with municipalities since 2003 to improve the energy use in their own facilities. This is our 9th annual forum and the first online forum due to the ongoing COVID-19 situation. With this new online format, we're thrilled to welcome municipalities from across the country who no longer have the logistical constraints of attending in person. So the overall theme for our 3-day event is practical pathways to net zero carbon buildings. Today, we'll be looking at how municipalities across the country are integrating carbon reduction goals into municipal asset management. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our sponsors, Simcoe Refrigeration and Enbridge Gas, who have been critical to helping us and our municipalities achieve our objectives. So concerning logistics, if you have any technical questions about the Zoom platform, please enter them in the chat box. And we will have a chance for questions following each speaker. So if you have any questions for the individual speakers related to content, please use the question and answer box for that. And we'll also circulate a question and answer document with the proceedings after the event. So our agenda, so after our opening remarks, we have Dustin Carey from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, who will be speaking to us about how FCM is supporting local governments regarding climate and asset management. We have Jade Schofield from the town of Whitby, who will be speaking about how they leverage asset management processes for carbon reduction at the town. And we're pleased to welcome Samir Yammine from the city of St. John, who will be speaking of how they integrate climate change and asset management into their building reductions. And Dharmen, Dhaliah and Michael Dean from the town of Halton Hills will be speaking to their integrated approach to asset management at the town. We will then present the 2020 Leadership Awards to our member municipalities for achieving high-performing buildings, and then the closing remarks. And I will now turn it over to Jillian Henderson, Director of the Climate Challenge Network, to provide the opening remarks.
Thanks very much, Catherine. And thank you to everybody for attending our second day. I know it's a little unusual. Usually we have this all in one day, but as Catherine mentioned, with the pandemic, we've broken this up into 3 sessions. So we appreciate that you keep coming back to all of our sessions. For those of you who were at our first session last week, we provided an update on the Mayor's Megawatt Challenge Net Zero Ice Rink project and the very, very technical and on the ground challenges of taking existing rinks to net zero. It was a nice dive into the technical and a really nice segue into today's session because it really looks at all of the challenges and the details of getting to net zero, which I think is key to all of us. After that session, I really sat back and thought about how, for all of us, we know for sure the big outcome is certain.
Welcome to Zoom. Enter your meeting ID followed by pound.
Sorry, just let that go. The fun of technology. We know we have to make a big impact on our climate. We all, many of us have climate goals to achieve.
Followed by pound. Otherwise, just press.
And make a significant change to our carbon emissions.
You have entered the meeting as a panelist. Attendees can now hear you.
What's this? Sorry, guys. Okay, starting again. Back one more time with feeling. I wanted to reflect on the idea that for us, the outcome in terms of climate change is certain. We know that we have to make significant changes. Otherwise, our world will not be the same and permanently altered. So carbon emissions, reducing our carbon emissions is key. What isn't key is how we're going to get there. And there are no quick fixes or cheap solutions. And in many cases, the technology is not even there yet, or may not be perfect, or may be too expensive. So it's going to take some leaps of faith and taking chances on doing things differently, which is a big change. We have to think differently, bigger, longer term, and very differently from how we've been acting to date. And Another thing that we feel at certainly at Climate Challenge Network is that it's important not to do it alone. There's a big learning curve in a lot of ways. So doing it collectively is the best way to learn from each other and not have to make mistakes alone or learn from each other. So I think that that's a nice segue into the speakers today, who are all who are working very hard on frameworks within which these many decisions can be made so that new and existing technologies can be leveraged, projects prioritized, and hard decisions about where you're going to spend your money, hard-earned money from taxpayers, on making the future a better place. So without too much ado, I'm going to hand it back to Catherine, who will give you an overview of our program and what we are trying to do to try to get to what your climate goals, and then on to the speakers. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jillian. I think you made a few really great points there. We need to really change how we've been doing things to date going forward, and the whole idea of doing this together. There is a lot to be learned from each other, so this is going to be critical to moving forward. So just very briefly, I just wanted to give a quick description of the Mayor's Megawatt Challenge for those who don't know us. So we launched the program in 2003 with the city of Mississauga. So Mayor Hazel McCallion put out the challenge to all municipalities. So we launched in conjunction with Toronto and Region Conservation way back in 2003. In 2019, the Climate Challenge Network was formed, really with the mandate of rapid scaling up of reductions in emissions caused by buildings, and sort of the big tent idea that Jillian alluded to, the collaboration among municipalities, as well as industry, academia, and utility companies all working together to achieve the common goals. And there's really 4 pillars of the program. So data-driven identification of savings potential and high potential buildings. So having a target and working towards that. Evidence-based determination of best practices. So when projects are implemented, doing the measurement and verification to show that the savings are actually real, and sharing that information with others. And that's where the networking between like-minded organizations, so networking between municipalities, between the energy managers, between the building managers and operators, and then networking with, like I said, utility companies and other like-minded organizations such as Federation of Canadian Municipalities and others. And really recognition and celebration of leadership by example. And we'll be showing that later on in the presentation with the presentation of our leadership awards to municipalities that have really made great strides and really showing their performance in their buildings. So we have a fantastic lineup of speakers today, and I'd really like to thank them here again for taking the time out of their really busy schedules to share their presentations with us today. So as I mentioned, we have Dustin Carey from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. He's a capacity buildings officer for the Municipalities for Climate Innovation Program. So welcome, Dustin. We have Jade Schofield from the town of Whitby. She's a project manager in sustainability and climate change. And Samir Yammine from the city of St. John, New Brunswick. He is the manager of asset and energy management. And we have Dhaliah from the town of Halton Hills. He's the senior manager of climate change and asset management strategic initiatives. And we have Michael Dean, also from the town of Halton Hills, the senior climate change and energy planner in climate change and asset management at the town. So again, thank you to all of our speakers for taking the time to share their stories with us today. And they've got lots of great insights to share, and hopefully you can take some of that away with you and work towards what they're doing in your own municipalities. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Dustin again, who will be speaking about how the Federation of Canadian Municipalities is supporting local governments in climate change and asset management. Welcome, Dustin.
Thank you, Catherine.
And you can go ahead and share. I stopped mine, that might be easier. There we go.
Okay. And thank you again for having me today. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to be starting today off with a slightly off-brand presentation compared to the energy reduction or energy management and greenhouse gas reduction. My focus with FCM has really been on the climate resilience side and the integration of climate adaptation within asset management. Much of the content of the framework I'm about to present, though, can be used particularly in the more strategy development and implementation components for the incorporation of energy management as well. So according to the 2016 infrastructure report card, about 25% of the Canadians that responded to a 2015 survey, I believe it was between 150 and 200 communities, have started to integrate climate change considerations within their asset management plans. Noted on this that it is primarily focused on climate risks. Intent of the survey. However, digging through the data, it was found that within some, particularly our sport and recreation facilities, there wasn't always that differentiation. So that 25% may include the energy management as well. Updates to this information collected from a wider array of communities should be available later this year or early next with the release of the Canadian Core Infrastructure Canadian Core Infrastructure Survey. So looking forward to that. And the rationale for bringing in climate risk into those asset management plans is pretty apparent. Historically, risk and within asset management has primarily been based on the condition of an asset. But as this image can very much show, that is not always the primary motivator of what can cause an asset or service to fail. As far as we know, this wastewater treatment plant could have been in very good condition prior to this, but just due to its proximity in a floodplain or too close to a coastal area that could be inundated by storm surge, whatever the geographic condition was that led to this, all of a sudden the condition of this wastewater treatment plant is no longer the most likely reason for this service to fail. And depending on the scale of damage, how long it could take for that water to recede, this could be a critical service that your community provides that could be offline for a number of weeks. But rather simple geographical measures, for instance, critical infrastructure within a floodplain, are not the only implication that climate change can have. It's a fairly complex, interconnected web of different climate hazards and the impacts they can have within the services you provide. And it's very much not a case of if one service is impacted, those implications stay there. Within integrated infrastructure systems, within the communities that we have designed and built, infrastructure systems are reliant on each other. If, for instance, severe weather knocks out your systems or your community's electrical grid, that could lead to the failure of pumping stations if they do not have backup generation, causing the flooding of buildings, the interruption of transport networks, and other important services that you provide. It's when FCM really got into the more direct capacity building with municipalities on integrating climate risk primarily into asset management, we did notice that there was kind of a lack of how-to documents for how communities can start to really scope out the implications and address, put forward ideas for how to address them. So for that reason, following the completion of 2 capacity building programs, the Climate Asset Management Network and the Leaders in Asset Management Program, we convened consultations with 11 communities that had gone through those, 2 of which you'll hear from later today, and put together this guide for integrating climate considerations into asset management. And as noted, we really wanted to make this more of a how-to document. While other documents did exist put out by Asset Management BC or the Atlantic Infrastructure Management Network, they could be more conceptual rather than some of those gritty details of exactly what questions a community should ask themselves, the resources they should look to, aspects like that. So in the design of this framework, we wanted to make it very much a step-by-step process that could be customized to fit really the priorities of that community. As you might expect, those 11 communities that we consulted with in developing this, they did not take the same approach to their integration of climate risk and asset management. So this framework is really intended to be a approach that can be adapted to your community, no matter where you are in your asset management or climate change journey, the resources you have available, the legislative system within your province, etc. Broken into 4 main phases: the identification, and again, some of those really early steps, such as identifying your service area, the critical assets that support it, and then pointing to resources to gather climate projections, both free and nationally available, as well as more specialized, the identification of climate hazards, as well as the identification of levels of service, including definitions of what they are, templates, the explanation between the services that you currently provide and the targets that you might want to achieve, and getting into that more assessment phase, what climate change could mean for exacerbating gaps between those targets and what you're currently delivering. It provides a number of resources to facilitate risk assessments for both particular assets as well as the services you provide resulting from climate change. And in the prioritization component, offers suggestions and reflective questions on the development of risk response strategies and the determination of really what are the solutions that you've come up with that are going to provide the most bang for your buck, what are the most feasible, and the like, as well as different scopes of categories that how you can measure feasibility and efficiency and overall how much good these will do for you. In the management phase, it does provide, this framework does provide some of the really core dimensions that are going to be needed and reflected on to make these strategies actionable. The who, where, what, why, when, how, as well as some of those are the recognition that this isn't a one-time approach. This is going to be a process of continual improvement, reflection, and the like. So it provides some of the questions for monitoring progress, and as well as reflections of how frequently should you come back to this and the like. As mentioned, we recognize that not every municipality across Canada is at the same stage in this process. As a result, we wanted to build in a number of different entryways, or entry points rather, really acknowledging that some communities may already have levels of service frameworks, risk management frameworks, or may want to focus on one or the other, both being relatively large undertakings. So we have identified which components of that 12-step framework really need to be focused on to achieve certain goals. The guide is quite peppered with case studies and other information that those communities that we had consulted with thought was really important for you as a potential user of this guide to know before following similar scopes of work, as well as other resources that can really help enable this. Things like a levels of service checklist for climate impacts, borrowed by work that the that Asset Management BC has done. Other checklists, early examples of frameworks that can be built on, data sources, templates, as well as if you have if you're looking for climate resources, it points you to where you can access them yourselves, as well as freely available help desks that organizations like the Canadian Centre for Climate Services, reaching out to them, they can help you understand your needs and interpret those through either directly or by connecting you with regional climate centers like Oranos in Quebec. I was asked to give just a little bit of an example of what a few of the communities that were featured in this guide have done on the more practical components. Selkirk, Manitoba, population of about 10,000, has been one of the municipalities that has really gained a good amount of recognition across Canada by using asset management as the primary entry point and lever for their climate change adaptation strategy. They worked with the Prairie Climate Center out of the University of Winnipeg to really understand what climate change will mean for each of their service areas. And it's at their service area where those climate impacts and the responsibility for solutions really lie. It is a switch from a number of communities that really provide those responsibilities at more of the department level, recognizing the fact that resulting from any particular climate impact, say a road washout, park inundation, destruction of trails, anything like that, you're going to need more than one department to come around and both respond to that, recover from that, as well as implement solutions. So it was an exercise in breaking down silos and making sure that the community, they are taking a whole of community approach to respond to the impacts and implications of climate change, as well as just make a case of resiliency to the larger Manitoba and business community. The city of Kenora in Northern Ontario, again, population of about 10,000, took a rather different approach for their climate change risk assessment framework. Kenora early on worked with Public Sector Digest to build a very robust inventory of all of their assets. And they decided that the most practical approach for them would be layering on additional information in that asset inventory to understand what climate change will mean, both for the probability of failure as well as the implications on the community. Again, probability of failure historically has been inferred based almost entirely on the condition or age of that asset. Kenora, being a very water-oriented community, recognizes that the impacts that are going to be most troubling for them are going to be water-oriented. As a result, that probability of failure now reflects its proximity within floodplains, any particular asset within their inventory. Their consequence of failure was broken down on a triple bottom line component, where it uses information such as the land use area, population density, the asset type, and the like, to really understand what that consequence will be in more than just terms of cost to the municipality. And just to really make this as intuitive and facilitated to the greatest degree possible, they built a standardized framework across this, their entire inventory, where any particular asset type, land use designation, the age, or whether it's in that identified problem area, i.e. a floodplain, can be used to infer that condition of failure or the probability of failure or the consequence associated. So with a very small asset management department, they suddenly have considerably more information that they can use for prioritizing asset replacement, refurbishment, and the like. And again, these triple bottom line framework considerations are things that can be adapted for very much the energy management side of things as well. That is all I've put together today, but I will welcome any questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Dustin. That was really great overview of what FCM is providing municipalities in terms of resources. I don't see any questions in the chat box right now, but just a reminder to everyone, if you do have any questions, please enter them there and we can revisit them later on, or we can make sure they get answered in the Q&A document But I have a feeling most of you are probably well aware of the resources that FCM provides and probably have a good understanding of that already. But again, if you have any particular questions, please feel free to share. And Dustin, I'm assuming all of that great information is on the website.
It is. I'll post the link to that guide in the chat.
Awesome. That would be great. Thank you so much. Okay. So moving on. Okay, next up we have Jade Schofield from the town of Whitby, who will be speaking to us on how they leverage their asset management processes for carbon reduction in the town. Welcome, Jade.
Thanks, Catherine. Very much appreciated. And we'll just have that little awkward stop while we pull up those slides. And of course, it's not showing up. So just give me a second.
Okay. And just so everyone knows, Dustin has posted a link to that guide in the chat. So please feel free to visit that for more information.
Interesting. It's open, but it's not showing. We did a test run and everything was fine.
I know you can. We've done so many test runs and there's always some kind of technical glitch. I'm getting a note that your bandwidth is low. Maybe that has something to do with it. I'm more than happy to share from my screen and then you can give me some prompts if that works.
Yeah, sure, that would be great. Whilst that will prevent any other technical glitches, hopefully. I'm on rural internet, so the joys.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for being so prepared.
Oh, okay. There we go.
Uh-oh.
Everyone see that okay?
Good morning,
Fantastic.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for your patience during those technical glitches. It always feels more awkward online, even though it tends to be shorter. So this morning, I'm really pleased to talk about some of the work we're currently doing at the town of Whitby to start to leverage asset management processes for carbon reduction. So if we could go to the next slide. Oh, I'm not seeing it. Oh, there we go. So for those of you that don't know the town of Whitby, we are 30 kilometers east of Toronto with a population of about 128,000. We're rapidly growing. And as a result, so are our corporate services. We are a local municipality within the region of Durham. And we're primarily suburban, but like I said, rapid population growth. And next slide, please. And we do have a bit of a history when it comes to sustainability and energy reduction and of course carbon reduction. In 2014, as per the Green Energy Act, we released our first corporate energy and greenhouse gas reduction plan. We also have a corporate sustainability plan, which follows the One Living Planet framework, which is very similar to the UN sustainability goals, to help us become a healthy, sustainable, and complete community from the corporation out. And then more recently, we've been strategic and funding partners in the Durham Community Climate Adaptation Plan, which does have some energy actions embedded within it. And most recently is the Durham Community Energy Plan, which even though it is primarily a community focus, there is a lot of synergies within our corporate actions as well. And in addition to our strategic initiatives, we are a member of a whole suite of organizations that have helped us, held our hands, funded us, given us direction, and making sure that we're able to achieve those goals within those strategies, including the MERS Megawatt Challenge. So thank you. Next slide. In addition to all of our strategic initiatives, last year, the Town of Whitby Council also declared climate change an emergency. And for most, this is very much an important declaration for us, particularly because the wording specifically describes and directs staff to consider climate change. Under bullet number 6, climate change is a priority in all activities and works completed across the municipality to strive for deep reduction in greenhouse gas emissions and to consider comprehensive and proactive implementation of measures to promote mitigation and resiliency in the face of climate change. And we wouldn't have been able to do that declaration if it wasn't for the amazing community support that brought this forward in the first place. So next step. So let's jump into corporate energy and emissions management. As mentioned, our first plan was completed in 2014. Next slide. And it was something that we were asked to do by the province under the Ontario Green Energy Act, which is now kind of merged into the Electricity Act. And within this plan, we did go above and beyond what is required under the minimum framework, which was to set and identify specific actions and targets as it relates to our corporate buildings. We went a little bit broader, and we also consolidated an emissions management plan that covers our fleet, waste, and lighting sectors. And within that, we had some quantitative targets to reduce corporate greenhouse gas emissions by 19%, and then overall energy consumption by 20% from 2012 to 2022. And within that plan, and I'm going to tell you now, it's about 200 pages long, there's a whole suite of actions and strategies that were identified in order to meet that objective. So next slide. And just to summarize, some of those top 10 actions, they weren't necessarily overly prescriptive. Implement cost-effective, energy-efficient projects into existing buildings, absolutely, and we can break that down further. But there was a lot of direction to create other plans and other guidelines in order to lead to that energy reduction target. However, no one ever did a back check. So when these actions were created, no one actually looked at all of those actions and then put them back into the model to see if this would actually be what we need to do in order to attain those targets. So next slide. Despite that, I think we've done somewhat well, particularly around the reduction of energy consumption. As you can see, we have seen a drop overall 14% in our electricity reduction. We have seen a spike in our natural gas consumption. We did move to some CHPs a couple of years ago, and we're still working on additional projects to help capture waste heat. So hopefully that will come down. But from a greenhouse gas emissions sector, being that we're just 2 years off, we're still not quite there when it comes to target. So next slide. There are a couple of lessons learned from the initial corporate energy management plan that we did complete. And I think the first thing, and as we start to dive deeper into the climate action, is that energy efficiency does not always equal carbon reduction. And carbon reduction doesn't always equal utility savings. And I think we need to be fairly frank about some of those conversations. Low-hanging fruit was low-hanging fruit for a reason, and that was because they were the things that hit all the boxes. It helped reduce our carbon, it helped reduce our energy, and as a result, helped reduce our operating costs. But as we're getting into the more tricky side of things, in order to really get into those deep carbon reductions, we definitely need to be more explicit about what our roadmap are. And that's when it comes down to our targets. Initially, when we created targets for our energy plans, we did energy audits on our buildings, or we did greenhouse gas inventories on our fleet, and added up all the potential actions and said, okay, here's our target. We know realistically, we have a lot of budget constraints, we have conflicting priorities, that we are not ever able to do every single action in a plan. So we need to take a bottom-up approach to make sure the actions align with other corporate priorities, such as asset management and our budget as well. So taking a much broader strategic kind of direction into the creation of these energy management plans. So not only are we building up success to be on track for those longer term climate change goals, but we're also not starting off field right away and never getting back to where we need to be. And then by doing this, hopefully by engaging multiple parties, multiple departments, you are going to get better buy-in for spending more upfront and helping to get that long-term benefit. Even though it really isn't an easy sell, it's really hard for municipalities to put capital in upfront thinking that they're going to save on utility costs, where to be honest, utility costs are such an unknown, and our use of our facilities is such an unknown, and our asset risk is also an unknown. And then finally, like I said, our energy plan was like 200 pages long, and when they're that long, no one picks them up, remembers any quotes in them, understands the targets, knows all the actions. So they tend to end up sitting on a shelf. And to be frank, that's somewhat what's happened with us. You know, we've had staff changes as well. So, you know, people haven't had that kind of deep connection with the plan that has been created, but we've come to a point where it needs to be updated. And as a result, we're taking a different approach. Next slide. So updating the plan, next slide again. So the approach we're taking in the update of our energy conservation demand management plan and our corporate emissions reduction plan is to actually engage asset management in a more detailed level. And the way that we're doing this is to acknowledge and understand that climate change is a risk, similar to what Dustin had highlighted, and it does need to be considered in the asset management process. But climate change can also be used to evaluate the benefit of an asset management decision. And I think of things like carbon accounting, life cycle analysis. We're getting even deeper into things like nature-based solutions. You know, so there's actually an opportunity to put a different spin on it and actually use climate change as a benefit of an asset. And then when it comes to the actual process, asset management is really unique in the sense that rather than starting from the top and developing a vision and goals and objectives, it actually looks at every individual asset and through a risk assessment process develops a deeper understanding of the role that individual asset plays in the functionality of an entire service, which is of course a municipality. Whereas climate change strategies start with the goal and the target and then list the actions, but we very rarely go back to those individual actions and make sure that they allow for our target and our climate climate action service to actually be achieved. So next slide, please. What we're doing in the town of Whitby through the update of our corporate energy management and greenhouse gas reduction plan is kind of flipping things around a little bit. On the left-hand side, you'll see what is typically the milestone process for creating a climate change or an energy reduction plan. It's very similar to the Partners for Climate Protection, and it's a great strategy. But when you're going into updating the plan, you may want to change things around. So what we're doing is we're focusing on what actions we can do first, and then we're doing the math and making sure those actions feed into our inventory, so it can help us develop that target, both short-term as well as how it helps us meet our long-term carbon reduction goals. And within the plan, we are building in the framework for monitoring. And once you have all of those things, you can bring them all together and create a nice, short, straightforward plan that has all of that framework outlined for you. Next slide. So when it comes to actions, you're probably thinking, how do you even start with those actions? Have you ever had a plan that recommends doing another plan or doing another study? Because I'll put my hand up right away, and I've definitely put those in there. We've done the opposite. We're making sure we're doing all of those individual plans first and then building the more higher up strategy. So right now, and Jodie's on the call, she's leading very much the facility side through the completion of energy audits, level 2 and level 3. And this will help us identify all the opportunity in town facilities where we can reduce energy from both an infrastructure basis, as well as any other kind of like monitoring benefits as well. The energy audits help us calculate the benefits in relation to both energy efficiency, cost savings, and carbon reduction. So it outlines those opportunities right in front of us. And it does allow us to deep dive a little bit more if there's some more complex actions. And I know there's things like the replacement of rooftop units and exploring different types of equipment that we could use to replace those versus doing a like-for-like replacement. At this stage, you can actually identify those opportunities and then start to build in any work that you need to do more complex design or more complex engineering. And then of course it provides you your basement and aligns with that asset replacement. It's really critical that you identify opportunities and align when you are going to do those opportunities with when that asset needs to be replaced. Similar for fleet, a fleet master plan identifies all the actions in fleet. It prioritizes what is available to us. Technology is still very limited when it comes to fleet replacements for the work that they need to do. It also identifies infrastructure, any gaps in technology, and again, making sure we align with asset management. And then we also look at the asset replacement pieces. So things like street lighting or parks, anywhere that could potentially be using energy, water, has a feed into the carbon, into our carbon inventory. It gives us a good idea of what that life cycle is, so we can actually develop synergies between a carbon life cycle and an asset life cycle. Identifies other risks, replacement costs, and budget timeframes. And finally, and if not most importantly, staff engagement. You've got to engage your staff at the front end of a plan, not when the plan is done. They often have the ability to identify the most innovative and most often the low-cost solutions through changes of actions. It enables you to close knowledge gaps, identifies inefficient processes and equipment challenges, and it brings forward concerns regarding conflicting priorities so you can address them on the front end. And hopefully that will help you optimize the service delivery, align asset, align climate and energy efficient goals. Next slide. So when we look at actions that help basically reduce the climate impact of building and asset management, we can look at things like renewable energy. Yep, it's expensive up front, but we've got to consider the asset piece, which reduces utility costs, increased resiliency, longer lifespan. Operator and occupancy training, make sure that you're optimally operating your equipment, you're reducing load, you're increasing preventative maintenance, and reducing the risk of failures. Optimize monitoring, and again, Jody really is your expert here. Looking at things like submeters and BIS, making sure you're actually tracking performance, able to identify issues right at the time that they happen, and also share the data, increase that awareness. The nuance of dashboards really do have a huge impact on both public and staff on trying to conserve energy. So it's a really great way to do that. And of course, energy management software, right? Without using like a software program to process things like invoices, you've got multiple people doing things separately in silos. But if you have one point source for all of the data, all the staff are using tracking and trending data in the same way. It identifies spikes from each of the parameters, whether it be financial or energy consumption. And it provides that opportunity for people to get together and talk and share their experience with that type of information. Next slide. And then there's synergies with fleet and asset management as well. So electric and plug-in hybrid vehicles, longer warranties, less maintenance, reduced operating costs. These are all great things from an asset management perspective, but they also align with our carbon goals. Right sizing, reduced operating costs. We're also making sure we're maximizing the use of an asset as well. And again, monitoring, GPS in fleet vehicles, making sure that we can optimize our routes, actually understand the true asset use of a vehicle and monitor driver behavior. So again, you've got that operator training component as well. And fuel monitoring is again similar to the energy management software. It's that single source for all of the data for each of the departments that need to look at it. Next slide. So that's the actions, and then it's a case of creating that targets and implementation. And in the past, we've created like a 5-year target, and then we also have this like reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 80% by the year 2050. And for a lot of people, it's really hard to understand how we get there. 2050 just seems so far away, even though it's really not at this point, and I'll probably still be working. I wouldn't have been retired yet. But we do need those roadmaps, and we need to understand that the decisions we make today, how they will impact our ability to meet that long-term goal. So greenhouse gas emission scenarios enables a broader understanding of how the actions impact the resources that are required to attain that long-term target. And we're just in the process of securing a sustainable solutions group to help us do this modeling for us. And basically they take a bottom-up stock rollover model that projects energy demand as a result of representing the evolution of energy consuming activities. And they're able to take into account all sorts of things like energy cost projections, technology innovations, budget restraints, purchasing processes, and they can actually model how we are able to create activities that allow us to address that demand. Next slide. And in addition to the framework, they also conduct a financial analysis. So now you not only have that roadmap from a carbon reduction perspective, but we also have an understanding of the financial impacts of doing that. So the financial analysis for each scenario, so a low carbon scenario, a business as usual scenario, or a moderate carbon reduction scenario, helps the municipality understand the decision requirements and costs of a proposed action. And it takes into account energy savings, revenue, if it's applicable, for example, renewable energy, investments, as well as things like carbon price inflation and credits, all the way to the year 2050, which is our ultimate goal target. And then hopefully using this approach, we are able to clearly define the net cost of an action and not just the upfront incremental cost. So we're finally doing a good job of tying in a life cycle cost approach from a capital, an operating, and a disposal perspective. Next slide. So once you have that framework in place, now you need to figure out how you're going to monitor. And by creating a framework, you're actually also able to create a carbon budget. So how much carbon can we afford to emit in any given period of time in order to align with our climate change goals? So it is a critical step in order to meet those long-term goals. You do need to have a carbon budget in place. It's just the way things are going now, and you need to have those greenhouse gas scenarios to understand what your carbon budget should be. And just so for those that aren't aware, a carbon budget is the cumulative amount of carbon dioxide emissions are permitted over a period of time based on those greenhouse gas emission scenarios. And by having a budget, similar to having a financial budget, it allows you to build in flexibility into a plan's implementation. So when there is an opportunity to replace equipment, but right now maybe a more innovative or low carbon technology isn't available, so we have to go for a like for like, we can factor that into our carbon budget and then determine where else we can find those savings. Similar to a capital budget, you know, say you only have $1 million a year, you have to pick which projects get priority. With a carbon budget, you get to pick which projects have a priority from a carbon standpoint. And these carbon budgets can serve as both short-term goals, so these are our carbon goals on an annual or every 5-year basis, but they also help us align with our long-term goals on an ongoing basis. So they really serve as that monitoring framework. Next slide. And other tools to support carbon budget implementation, again, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to monitor your energy on an ongoing basis, and not just at facilities, but for fleet, waste, lighting, all of our actions that result in some type of consumption in some way that results in a carbon emission. Corporate building standards, making sure that, you know, we are moving forward and getting more progressive as time goes on. You know, a standard today that is deemed as a high standard in 10 years' time is going to be business as usual. So we need to make sure we're factoring in opportunities to keep advancing. And for those of you that aren't aware, we have the Whitby Green Standard in place now, which is a tiered green development system. And we're hoping to also align that with our corporate building performance. We also report our climate actions on an annual basis through a sustainability report to council. And we leverage third-party monitoring, such as the Carbon Disclosure Project, to actually have someone from the outside looking in to make sure that we're on track to meeting those goals. Next slide. So it all wraps up into one simple plan that has memorable goals and targets. It aligns directly with the target that has been put in place, and those actions are aligned directly with that target. It defines how those targets will be achieved through implementation. We identify the risks, and of course, the framework and implementation and monitoring actions. But most importantly, it allows for flexibility. We know that things change, different pressures come up, and conflicting priorities arise. And having a plan that can pivot to this is really important for its success. And next slide. So our next steps are we'll have a final energy and greenhouse gas reduction plan by the end of March of 2021. Jody, who's on the line, is in the process of handling a number of projects, including the installation of sub-meters, which will be complete by January. energy management software by the end of March of 2021. We're also working on our Whitby Green Standard and finding ways to align that standard with our corporate buildings. And we're also now moving into the resiliency side, so we'll be able to address some of the components that Dustin highlighted in his presentation, hopefully by the end of fall 2021. So it's a busy year for 2021. I think that's everything from me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jade. That was a fantastic presentation. Lots of great tips for other municipalities, lots of great lessons learned, which is really helpful for others when moving forward with their plans, and really given us a lot to think about. We have a question. We have a question, if you could elaborate a little on installing sub-meters. So maybe elaborate a bit on the buildings that they're going into. I'm not sure if, Jay, do you have these details, or if that would be a question for Jody that we could answer offline and share with everyone? Maybe just the building types and what types of equipment, if you have that information.
Yeah, you're not able to unmute Jody, but I can touch on it at a high level, but Jody can definitely provide you way more detail. We're looking at one facility right now just because of budget constraints. We're moving forward with the McKinney Recreation Center, so it's an ice pad community center. We're looking at gas, water, and electricity meters. And again, Jody really is your expert on all the details. She's developed all the terms of reference and the procurement side of things and all of that great stuff. So yes, definitely recommend reaching out to Jody.
Okay, fantastic. I have another question related to your life cycle financial analysis tool. Is it a calculator that you can plug data into, or is it more of a manual analysis or calculation? Just thinking if there's like many projects, how that would be dealt with.
Yeah, and that's a great question, because it really comes down to the life cycle piece is actually looking at that long-term strategy. So bundling all of the actions that need to be done in order to create the scenarios. In order to create that life cycle financial analysis tool on an individual action basis, we do need to work closely with our purchasing department in order to create some type of like quickly plug in data for a more like quick calculation. And that's something that I'm hoping will be an action that comes out of this plan and is quickly prioritized. I haven't found a quick tool yet, and actually my university background is in LCA, and I still haven't found a easy to use tool that would allow us to use it at a municipal level for all of our projects. Sorry to not really be able to answer your question there.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, because certainly when we're looking at the ice rinks, we've identified that as a priority for implementation, is that really people need a quick life cycle financial analysis tool. So that's certainly one of the outcomes we're looking at, but just for the ice plants right now, it would be interesting to see if another life cycle financial analysis tool was developed for other municipal buildings as well.
Okay. Anyone else has any questions for Jade? Please feel free to enter them here. Jillian, do we have any questions, or should we just move on?
I think we can move on.
Okay. Great. Well, again, thank you so much, Jade. You've given us a lot to think about here, and lots of great lessons learned for other municipalities going forward. Okay. So next up, we have Samir Yammine from the city of St. John, New Brunswick. And I'd like to give a really special thank you to Samir. You've probably heard in the news that they had a quite significant cyber attack in the municipality. So Samir has gone above and beyond to recreate his presentation and deliver it to us today. Would have been very easy to not do this, Samir, given everything you have going on right now. So we'd really like to thank you for joining us to share your story with us.
No, thank you, Catherine. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly.
Okay, good morning, everyone. We're very happy to be here. I don't want to miss this opportunity here. So the last couple of days, we tried to put some kind of presentation together. So it's not going to be perfect. It's going to be a lot of high level information. So bear with me here so I can share my screen, please. Thank you. Okay, let's see.
And just to let everyone know, there's some additional links to check out in the chat box if you're interested.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you, everyone, again. So, so what I like to do, I provide the audience here with overall presentation is how did at the city of St. John, New Brunswick, how did we factor in climate change and our asset management program into reducing our greenhouse gas reduction into our municipal as well as our water facilities? And also, how did we maximize our environmental, social, and economic benefit to get the best back on this project? So I would like, this is going to be a high level presentation. A lot of information is going to be very high level. I'm not going to go into the detailed technical or process information. However, if anyone have any information on more detail, I would like very much to discuss it offline or online during this presentation. So basically, we're looking to, I'd like to provide you with overall presentation about the City of St. John Climate Change Action Plan. Also talk about the implementation strategy we took on our municipal building to help us reduce greenhouse gases as well improve the level of service. And then finally, we're going to talk about some current progress we made so far on our greenhouse reduction in our building. So basically, we have a climate change adaptation plan, which I'm very proud of it to have it completed last year. And this plan was adopted by council, approved by council in May 6, 2019. The climate change action plan is very detail oriented, resulted oriented with objective to meet some greenhouse gas target. It consists of three pillars. I call it pillar or area, which is the climate change adaptation strategy, climate change mitigation strategy, which consists of our community greenhouse gas and action plan, corporate greenhouse gas and action plan, and lastly, our asset management program strategy. First, I'd like to give you over idea about our climate change adaptation strategy. This strategy, the objective of this strategy is first of all, is to improve our community and infrastructure resilient to climate change hazard. And this plan was adopted actually on Monday, November 9, 2020 by council, which include various strategy and action to help us mitigate any risk as a result of climate hazard. As you know, in the St. John, we have three main climate hazard, which is the seawater level, the surge flooding, storm surge, as well flooding. So we did identify a detailed strategy and action as well as a bylaw to help us mitigate this strategy. As well as part of the council meeting on Monday, the council has agreed to develop a climate change committee to oversee this implementation of the climate change adaptation plan. And lastly, to make sure that we incorporate any of these changes or any of this recommendation in the plan into the next iteration of our municipal plan. Second item is our community greenhouse energy action plan, which was also adopted last year. And in it, we have developed a detailed project, you call it, or strategy, whether it is on local renewable energy reduction, on energy efficiency, transportation, or on education and awareness. Our current emission, which we are a population of approximately 70,000 people there. Our current emission is around 653,000 tons of CO2, and we are forecasting to have by 2025 594,000 tons of CO2. So we're looking at 90% reduction by 2025 and 18% by 2035. I'm not going to concentrate on this presentation on our community greenhouse gases. However, there's a lot of work going on right now, whether to meet some of these targets, and we are on the right track to meet our target by 2025 here through some local renewable energy, our district energy system, and we estimated that if we be able to reduce our greenhouse gases by 9%, we are approximately looking at 44 million annual saving into the community, which we were going to divert over $1.51 billion into our energy, into our local energy economy. We already completed our implementation and monitoring and our governance structure, and we're ready to take it to council for approval. The next pillar is our asset management program. And this program started in 2016 with a lot of help and funding from FCM here. Our main objective of the asset management program is how to be able to provide an optimal level of service. And we want to make sure we provide the sustainable level at the lowest life cycle cost. And how we're going to do this is by managing our current and future assets in more effective, efficient manner. So how we gonna maintain this level of service? How are we gonna achieve the level cost? How are we gonna achieve to reduce our costs, whether it's capital, operating, or greenhouse gases? So what we did here is we took a multi-phase approach on our asset management program. So we need to understand from the beginning that we need to choose that we engage the staff, electric official during the process. So what we did here, we developed a policy to give us the guideline and the resources needed to go forward and implement a comprehensive asset management program. So we have the policy approved by council, and then we did the strategy to tell us what needs to be done, what are our strategies to help us move forward with this implementation. And lastly, we develop a roadmap to identify the activities and tasks required to implement a comprehensive asset management program. This took us a few months to establish the foundation to help us move forward with our asset management program. We did a lot of engagement with the staff, with the public, with the elected officials to make sure that everything is buy-in into this program. Secondly, is the most important thing here is in order to have an accurate, effective asset management program, you need to understand the state of your infrastructure. You need to have a good data on your infrastructure in order to help you to manage your infrastructure, whether it is operation, whether it is the capital, and what is the long-term sustainability of the program. So we did develop a data structure for each of our asset group to make sure our asset group, they are consistent in their data structure when we start gathering data. We start improving our data accuracy, whether on condition data and so on. And what we did here, we developed an organization structure to make sure all staff, whether different departments, are collaborating in a sustainable manner to move forward with implementing this asset management program. And when we did develop a risk rating system, which take into consideration climate change to help us to prioritize our capital investment and to identify where we need to spend our money or our capital investment, especially where we have various competing priorities to help us maximize our cost and capital investment. And finally, what we did here is we tried to centralize all our data into one location to help us be able to manipulate the data, to manage the data, to update the data. So what we did, we have over 95% to 98% of our infrastructure, which consists from linear asset to vertical asset, are all mapped into our GIS system. So this phase 2 is already completed. We did complete it last year, but always we have a process to keep updating it. So what we did here in phase 3, we are working to develop a process, a workflow process to ensure all our assets are updated on a regular basis, whether we are updated inventory, level of service, or our capital instead. We need to develop this process here. We need to be able to, how we going to measure our performance on our infrastructure, whether it's operation, whether it's financial, whether it's a customer. So we are in the process to develop a level of service and KPI to help us manage the performance of our infrastructure. And finally, we did establish all the guidelines we need right now, the data structure we need, the risk rating we need, the condition rating need, all this has been established right now. So what we are in the final process of implementing an asset management information system to help staff manipulate data mining of our asset, and we'll be able to manually develop our capital program, our operation schedule, our maintenance schedule, our work order system. So we are in the process of implementing our asset management information system. So this will give you some idea about our climate change adaptation plan, our community greenhouse gases, and our asset management plan. And finally, which I will spend a lot of time on it, is our corporate greenhouse and energy action plan, which is part of our climate change climate change action plan, which was approved by Council in May 6, 2019. So we did develop a target, which is our greenhouse target to have 30% by 2025 from level 2015, below level 2015. And we have a long-term target, which is to be carbon neutral by 2040. We are moving ahead with this target, and we did identify projects. We went into detail to identify projects into detail to help us achieve the short-term target, 30%, and also the long target, which include some on our fleet and transit strategy, and mostly on our deep building energy retrofit, which we are going to discuss it later on, and our district energy system. Hopefully, if we meet the target by 2025, and we are aiming to meet it by 2025, we are expecting to reduce our annual energy cost by over $2.2 million and reduce our greenhouse by over 7,000 tons of CO2. So the goal of our corporate greenhouse gases here is to help us reduce our total energy use and greenhouse gases. Also, we want to help community and business sector with our lesson learned, and also continue advise council and staff on the best management practices, on the new guideline on procurement. And the most important thing, we want staff to take ownership of their building, whether it is on the water side or on the building side, to take ownership and start taking initiatives themselves. And we need to foster a shift toward a low carbon technology. City of St. John is not new to energy efficiency and reduce greenhouse gases. We've been working on this for the last 15 years. As of 2016, we will be able to reduce our greenhouse gases by 24% from 1996, which translated to over 2.3 million energy saving annually as of today. We will be able to solicit some funding from various government and federal agency, FCM, over $22 million grant and loan towards some of this energy efficiency. And we will be able to dispose over 35,000 of gigajoule in natural gas as a result of this as a result of our energy management program as of 2016. Now we want to go beyond what we did before. We want to go deep into our building. We want to be able to further reduce our energy consumption and greenhouse gases. And we need to be able to maximize our environmental and social and economic benefits. So we launched a program, we call it the Municipal Deep Energy Retrofit Program, which is all on our building, which consists of over 151 facilities, consist between lift station as well as municipal building. The program was launched in 2019, and we were successful to receive over $4.7 million from Low Carbon Economy Fund, from FCM, from the Disaster Mitigation Fund, as well from our energy provider. And we're hoping to complete the program by March 2024. The objective of this program, and we are aiming to meet it, and we are significantly successful to meet it here, is to reduce our greenhouse gases by 4,000 tons of CO2. As well, this is the good part here, is we're not only reducing our greenhouses, also we're looking at to reduce our infrastructure deficit. Also, as well, reduced by our operating and energy costs by over $600,000 annually, which is significant for the size of the city of St. John. And we'll reduce our capital, improve the level of service as well, and renew our infrastructure. Implementation. We've been working on the program since last year. We have engaged a third-party consultant to do a detailed energy audit, as well as a building condition assessment on over 31 buildings. We did complete this one here. We want to tie in our energy audit as well as the condition of our version together to help us again to maximize our benefit and to ensure that our asset management program is aligned with what we're doing here. We have identified an implementation plan which lists all the projects with all the economic, social, and financial benefit as well greenhouse gas reduction on it. So we did identify, and we have prioritized our project, how we're gonna do it in the next 4 years. A measurement and verification is already in place also, including some metering, data analysis to help us not only monitor, however, also to optimize our benefit here. And it is important for any project to have a measurement and verification plans in place in order to make sure we achieve or even exceed the result we wanted. We are in the process, as part of our implementing phase, we need to continue update our asset management program, continue update our asset inventory, continue project on the risk assessment, and reduce our infrastructure. So this is part of our process for us to help us move forward with our asset management program as well. We have already established a committee with various stakeholders from different departments to work, and we are meeting bi-weekly to continue to monitor the progress on our project. And also, I'm going to talk about the decision criteria we use. So this is, I developed it yesterday, a couple of days ago, to show you how the information, and how the information are flowing from our climate change mitigation strategy, from our climate change adaptation strategy, and our asset management, how they flow into how we are managing our infrastructure and our community planning, especially when we're dealing with building. When we look at a building, we don't look at it from only greenhouse gases. We also look at it from the resilient point of view, from adaptation. We look at it from process, from our asset management group, whether it is high risk, whether it is have impact on our infrastructure, what is a long term. So we are trying to take into consideration all this strategy we have adopted by council in May 6, 2019. So this is show you how we are embedding all this information into our infrastructure and community planning, and this is critical. To explain to you more in detail, this is a evidence-based decision we are using when we identify measures in order to reduce energy greenhouse gas on our building. So this is really literally we are using this evidence-based. We take into consideration the life cycle costs, which include not only the social cost of the carbon energy, also the energy cost, the infrastructure renewal, the infrastructure deficit, any information, preventive maintenance. All this are we taking it into consideration when we do the life cycle. When it's come to risk, yes, as previously heard it, we're not looking on risk only on the condition of the asset. Excuse me, sorry about that. I have to take it back again here. Bear with me for a second here. I lost it somehow. Here. So the risk, we're not looking, when we take a condition, when we take on the risk, we're not looking at the probability of failure, which is the physical condition of the asset. What we did here is we are integrating into our risk is the climate change vulnerability assessment here. So these are be taken into consideration when we do our evidence-based decision. And the lastly is we need to understand the impact on the level of service, because the asset exists for only one reason, is to provide level of service. So we take into question, are we improving the level of service? Are we enhancing? Are we maintaining it? Or this has an impact on the level of service? So we are taking all this into consideration where we identify what the measure we need to identify, what the measure we need to implement in order not only to reduce our greenhouse gases and also to maximize our capital investment and help us move forward to improve the level of service. So current progress, we are excited about project. This project is moving forward. We are moving along very much with this process. We already completed over 15 projects here. We're going to be working with the natural resources of Canada on implementing sub-metering, do some data analysis to determine the performance of our building, also to help us monitor remotely. We have established the criteria to prioritize our project. We have already developed a working committee right now. We have completed energy audit and BCA on over 30 buildings. We are seeing a result of what we're doing right now on building. Next step, we have a lot of work ahead of us going with the next step. We're going to continue with the implementation of management plan. We're going to continue conducting building assessment and energy audits to help us improve the data accuracy of our building infrastructure. One area we are weak on it and we need to work on it is our transportation, which is our fleet and transit. We are in the process to develop a roadmap to help us move to a low carbon electrification, our buses and fleet also. We are looking at developing a general over government structure for our climate change. In it, with this government structure will be able to oversee not only the climate change adaptation plan, also to see the climate change mitigation and asset management. We're looking at overall hierarchy for our government structure. We're looking to see how we're going to embed it, guideline and process to ensure that climate change is making into any decision we make on our infrastructure, whether on the building side or whether on the linear infrastructure, whether it is road or underwater, stormwater, and so on. And we got to continue to solicit federal and provincial funding to help us move forward with our climate change action plan and meet our objective. So for me, that's it for me right now. I know I speak fast. My wife always tells me I speak fast here. I hope you can have everything clear. But however, I know this is a high level information. I didn't want to go into the detail. Otherwise, I'll be here for days explaining our strategy and so on. But I'll be very happy to answer any question, whether online or offline. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Samir. That was a very fantastic presentation. Again, giving us a lot to think about here. And I'm definitely seeing some common themes amongst the work that you're doing. Life cycle costing comes up again and again. The sub-metering as being a critical component of measuring, and then the measurement and verification, as well as staff engagement. So all very common themes. I guess I had a question. If you had one piece of advice to give your colleagues going into this, what would it be?
You need to have elected official. You need to have you have to have elected buy-in into program. One of the area we were successful at the City of Saint John to implement our climate change action plan is we have to educate the elected official to understand the importance of our strategy on climate change. How can everything align together to help us move forward and understand the benefit, the long-term benefit, not only on the social and the environment as well as the economic benefit. This is one area. And the second area, engage your staff. Ask the staff to take ownership of what they're doing, to understand the benefit, and to have always some kind of working committee to meet every couple of weeks on different work, whether on the asset management or on climate change and so on, Otherwise, if you don't update your asset management program or update, you become static. You need to be dynamic to move forward. Otherwise, you may end up doing it every next year, 2, 3 years from now on. So this is the lesson learned I can give. Engage, engage, engage.
That's great, Samir. I had a question about how you see, there's a lot around the decision-making process and how you're feeding in all this information. How are you finding, like, bringing all of this information together to make your decision process? Are you doing this by committee? Are you doing it individually? How are you planning that? I know it's a bit of a tough question, but it seems to be at the heart of what we're doing here.
Data is very important here, and I know we are struggling here. I know you have people working in different organizations in the solo approach. Each one, they have their own data Excel sheet or something. What we did, and we are successfully, we are centralizing our data in the GIS. So, like, for example, when I did my capital program for 21 to 23, up to 23, it took me half a day to do it because all the information I have updated was in a central location, was done into a data structure which is consistent. I will be able to retrieve this data, assess it, and develop my program. So to continue updating your data is very important. Centralize your data and make sure your data is consistent, the data structure is consistent. I don't know if I was able to answer your question or not.
Yeah, that absolutely answered my question, and I think feeds into exactly our thinking. So it's terrific to have a like mind for sure. Catherine, do you have any other questions? Do we have any?
There's actually not any questions in the Q&A box, which means that you did a very excellent job of getting your message across, Samir. That was great. What I'm particularly interested in hearing going forward, the guidelines and processes you were mentioning to embed climate change in decision making. So we're really looking forward to hearing the updates on that. Maybe we can touch base again in the future once you have that developed, because I think that's something that all of the municipalities would be really interested in, the nitty gritty of how those guidelines will work. So
Absolutely.
Really looking forward to that. So thank you so much, and good luck with all of your challenges in St. John's. And thank you so much for taking the time out of your very stressful situation to share your story with us. That's fantastic.
Well, thank you very much, Pat, and thank you, Jillian. This was very good. Anybody have any question, give him my email or phone number. I'll be very happy to share any information and learn from others. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up, we have Dharmen and Michael from the town of Halton Hills to speak to us about their integrated approach to asset management at the town. So welcome, Dharmen. Welcome, Michael.
Good morning. Thank you, Catherine, and good morning, everyone. I guess everybody hears me because I don't see anybody reacting, so I'll share my screen.
Perfect.
Okay, so
here we go.
Okay, so good morning again, and we are excited today, myself and Michael Dean, to talk about I guess the continuation of the sequel from last year. What we presented, and today is a little bit of that, the progress we've made. So quick introduction. I know there's a large group listening, so I hope you'll get value from that presentation, both from an asset management perspective and a climate change perspective. So myself and Michael will present that. So I'll introduce myself, quick bio, and then I'll leave that to Michael to introduce himself. So I'm the Senior Manager, Climate Change and Asset Management for the town of Halton Hills. I've been there for almost 4 years now. I'm a board member of Asset Management Ontario, very active in the field of asset management, but now getting a little bit more into climate change, learning the tricks here. I'm a published author. I published a couple of books on asset management, working on my third one. And also, like today, speaking, trying to share knowledge and help everybody out there to advance both now asset management and climate change. So again, like I said, I'll let Michael introduce himself I won't say too much because I don't want to steal his thunder. He's got lots to talk about. And also I'll start my timer so that I don't take too much time and give enough time for Mike to talk about the technical, exciting stuff. So a little bit about Halton Hills is a small town, 62,000 people, 2 urban centers, Georgetown and Acton, and lots of rural areas, 3 hamlets, and very recognized for its natural beauty. About almost more than half, 1/3 of the town is covered with tree canopies, natural assets. And the 2 particular things about Halton Hills these days is one, and we'll talk about, Mike will talk about that too, is we've set ourselves a net zero target by 2030, very aggressive. And the second one is for the next 5-10 years, we are going to grow really, really fast. So how do we make sure we, with all the other challenges that municipalities are facing, plus those 2 big ones, how do we manage that? That's our key challenge. So let's get started. So these are the 2 letters that are very, very familiar to us. I know in the audience there are asset management practitioners and also climate change and energy professionals, energy management professionals. So these letters will ring some bells in your mind, right? A and M, right? So A being asset, adaptation, management, maturity, mitigation, and it goes on. So the challenge today that we as municipalities face, and all other organizations, I should say, in the private sector, is how do we handle those 2 priorities, right? How do you not drop the ball on one and drive the other? And at the Halton Hills, we face that, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. So how do you keep doing your asset management stuff while considering climate change? And there are lots of I would say overlaps, duplications, similarities, name it, all right? So that we need to leverage on, right? So we need to leverage on what we're doing with everything around us, because at the end of the day, climate change has a huge impact on how we do our asset management planning, be it for the core infrastructure, the roads, the bridges, the water, wastewater, the other infrastructure, the parks, the open spaces, the transportation, and also our ecosystem, natural assets. So what we found is that it's gonna impact, it is impacting the way we plan, we develop our asset management plans, right? So how do we consider that, all these into the equation? That's the challenge that we need to face. So at Halton Hills, we're taking that integrated approach, right? Having that A+M approach that we've just seen, is how do we mix both of those within the organization while we take the asset lifecycle approach, right? From the planning, the acquisition, to the maintenance, operation, and disposal, and at the same time maximizing the synergies and minimizing conflicts. And one of the things that I remember, and Jillian and Catherine will remember that, Mike as well, I got invited at Halton Hills in the corporate energy management project team to develop update the energy management plan. And one of the questions that came up is, when we make decisions around assets, have we considered the life cycle? And we've heard that today from the previous presentations. Have we considered how we're going to maintain that? Have we considered how we're going to dispose of those assets, right? So we should have that synergy, and also there will be lots of conflicts, that's for sure, right? How do we navigate through those conflicts? And I like to talk about these conflicts and synergies as interdependencies. There's going to be lots of those interdependencies. How do we navigate through that? And it's going to be a very complex system that you're going to be building, and that's what we're trying to build. And we need to sort out how we navigate through that. So just to remind the audience about the 4 key fundamentals of asset management: leadership, alignment, value, and assurance. I'll talk about all those 4 in a few minutes, and see what is the approach that we should be taking, because we know that what we've been doing so far will not be good enough. We need to do things differently. And that's what I've been preaching in my books, is that you have to recognize the challenge, you have to take a different approach. Business as usual is not good anymore, right? So leveraging on those key fundamentals, we need to understand, like Halton Hills and many other municipalities, as we've heard, as we see, we have back in 2018 the Ontario reg for developing our asset management plan, level of service, and all that stuff. And then in 2019, Halton Hills adopted the climate change emergency declaration, right? So do we need to drop one or the other, or how do we manage those competing priorities? And here I have to say, and Samir mentioned that too, leadership is key, right? So council recognized that we need to drive our asset management, but also now we have that climate change emergency, the net zero target by 2030. How do we manage both at the same time, right? So leadership is important. Council support as well as senior management support, and also all staff. So just to give, for those who are not in the field of asset management, Ontario Reg 588-17, Section 5 talks about climate change, and very much in detail. And we've seen vulnerabilities being mentioned in the previous presentation. How do you factor in vulnerability? And in asset management, we talk about risk management, and these are where the link is. Adaptation is mentioned, costs, life cycle costs, right? Maintenance and operations costs. Mitigation is mentioned, and also disaster planning and contingency planning, funding. How do we build resiliency in our assets and infrastructure? How do we build resiliency in our community, right? Using our approach in asset management. So that's about asset management. And from a climate change perspective, the town back in last year, we've adopted a low carbon resilience framework because we have that target, that net zero target by 2030. So how do we both at the same time have a framework for adaptation, a strategy for adaptation, and a strategy for low carbon? So I won't go through all these details, but these are lots of projects on the go for now, and in the future we have a climate change work plan that's being constantly updated, and constantly we have projects ongoing. And the key thing also about making progress is you have to have that, I talk about the support, and that governance structure has to be there. So I don't have a slide on the governance structure for asset management, but we've been having it for almost 3 years now, 2 years now, and it's been running great. We have a corporate asset management steering committee and an asset management network team that we've been meeting very regularly. For the climate change, we have a governance structure with a climate change action task force chaired by the mayor himself, and with the senior management team on that task force and a few councillors. We have 2 steering committees, a low carbon steering committee and a climate change resilience steering committee, both chaired by councillors, and one led by Michael Dean and the other one led by Rija Rasool. So this is very important. That's why I want to tell the audience, you will get nowhere if you don't have that support and that structure in place. That's the foundation, right, to drive things around. So the other one, so that's leadership. Alignment. So for many asset management practitioners, you will recognize this Venn diagram. It's taken from ISO 55000. So we say we need to align ourselves within an organization from the tactical, from managing assets on a tactical level, operational level, to the strategic goals of the organization. But now we have to shift. Our mindset is now, it's not only within the organization, but how do you impact your community? How do you impact the ecosystem? How do you impact the climate change wave that's happening, global warming, right? So that alignment has to be shifted, again, beyond the organization, right? And if you look at so we shift now to the value, right? The third fundamental of asset management is, we look at the definition of asset management is coordination of activities to realize value, right? So what does that mean in our context? Means that in our organization, everybody is doing different things, right? Finance, project engineers, engineering, planning, you name it, right? Everybody does their own thing. But at the end of the day, how do we define that value, right? Value, what does it mean for you as an organization? Not for you as a department, not for you as an individual, but as an organization. So I'm pretty sure everybody, 100%, goes to work every day with good intentions to realize value, right? But for me, when I speak at different conferences and seminars, and what I say is that my definition of asset management has changed. It's not about realizing value anymore. It's about how to stop destroying value, right? That's what will make you advance in what you're trying to do here, right? In realizing value is how do you stop destroying value? We all have to-do lists, but do you have a what not to do list, right? I think this will make us move forward even faster and better than focusing on just realizing value. Because if you look around you, a lot of activities and decisions are being made on destroying what we're trying to build, okay? And I'm not pointing fingers at anyone here, right? It's no different to somebody come and say, you need to reduce your capital cost, your capital budget. You need to reduce your operational budget. So here we go, asking us to destroy value because we built our budget around delivering certain services, around managing risks, right? So where do we go and reduce those costs? So we should be taking the other way around is let's see how we should optimize our service delivery, and then we'll see how cost is impacted, right? So so how do we make those changes, right? There are different approaches that I'm going to be talking about. Looking at time, I'm halfway through, so it's good. So in asset management, we talk about those balancing act, performance, risk, and cost. And Samir and Jade also talk about that. So what does that mean for us now in the new context? So moving from an optimum decision-making process to having that integrated decision-making process, right? And in that, we have to be aware that there will be some trade-offs for sure, right? Trade-off could be on the cost side. And as you will see, Mike will speak to that. There will be an impact on performance, maybe. So we need to do that, our due diligence and evaluate those risks and cost and performance, but take that integrated approach to make those decisions. The next one is about the system approach, right? Initially, when we talk about asset management, we talk about the life cycle phases of the assets, right? Which is our system, our world where we're living. If you talk to someone in engineering, they think about the asset, right? The life cycle of planning and designing it, right? If you talk about somebody in public works, he or she is thinking about the way I'm going to maintain that asset, operate that asset. But now we need to shift our focus to think about organization-wide, think about ecosystem-wide, which is getting even more complex. Actually, we are in a very complex situation in our small world, in our department, just to coordinate efforts. But now think about coordinating efforts within the organization, and think about coordinating efforts within the community, right? So we need to shift that, and don't let fear stop you, because at the end of the day, as Dr. Deming says, we need to transform the organization. We need to transform the way we do things. So the next thing is adopting that collaborative approach, right? In asset management, we keep talking about the silo approach, right? But I've changed it. I said, no, it's not anymore about the silo approach. Yes, it is a silo approach, but it's also about the individuals. It's about remove your blinkers, right? Everybody think about, put their own blinkers, depending on their mood, and they do things the way they want. We have to remove that. And we keep hearing about the term, let's adopt the climate change lens, the climate lens, right? So what does that mean, right? It means that you have to remove your blinkers. You have to remove those silos thinking, right? So that you are able to put that lens. It's not just be the way you are and just take a climate lens and take a look at that. No, it's about changing the way you think. And that means for an organization, moving from a mechanistic to an organic way of operating. So we set ourselves for failure because we developed this mechanistic organizational chart, finance, public works, right, and asset management. So my advice to many asset management practitioners is don't become a silo yourself, right? Otherwise, you're just defeating the purpose, right? creating another problem for the organization. So we need to move to that organic approach within organization, which means more collaboration, more sharing, and more coordination. So what does that mean? And here we come to the assurance, which is the fourth key fundamentals of asset management. How do you sustain that over the long term? It's not about one decision that you make. It's about the way you behave going forward in the organization, the way you operate for the long term. Whether you are here today or somebody else is coming in tomorrow, we need to sustain that over the long term, right? So adopting that common decision-making framework with everybody having that lens. Now, it doesn't mean that everybody will have to have one lens just looking at from a perspective of climate lens. No, in that lens, there will be different filters. Unfortunately, the filters will keep adding on, right? And we need to be able to manage through that, right? So everybody have that collaborative approach, because out there are lots of opportunities, and we've heard it from the different presenters, from Jade, from Samir, and also from Dustin. Lots of opportunities out there. Let's leverage on that, right? I'm not going to go through all that, so you guys know that, but there are so much happening in organization every day, so many decisions being made, so many projects ongoing and or being initiated. These are opportunities for us to jump on that bandwagon and make a difference, right? So that's where we need to be at the forefront. And here are some of the examples. I'm not going to go through all of them, but at every level in the organization, there are those opportunities, right, to make that difference in fighting climate change, but also putting in place a very solid asset management plan. So I got 10 minutes, maybe less than 10 minutes. So a couple of things here is that the town of Halton Hills has recognized that we need to integrate asset management and climate change. And we are one of the few municipalities that have done that. And our department report to the CEO's office. So that's a very great move, I guess. And we have a governance approach, right? And here, this is our team at this point after the reorg that happened last year. So we report directly to the CEO's office through our director. And we have a team of, sorry, I don't have the names here. Sorry, I missed some names here. I apologize to Rija and Christine. So just to give a shout out to the team, a team of superstars here, I just have to say, Michael Dean, who's, you will hear from him. I won't introduce him. The senior climate change specialist, I just added that slide last minute. Rija Rasul, I guess she's hearing us now. Asset management analyst coordinator is Christine Smith, who we stole from City of Guelph. And Jennifer Spence, who's been around, our climate change outreach coordinator. So a great team here. And also I want to give a huge shout out to because our team, we cannot be the only one making the difference. We leverage a lot on the other departments, the facilities group, both the engineering, capital project, and also operational, as well as any other department, finance, planning. So we're working collaboratively with them. And I already mentioned about senior management and council. So the approach we take, and some of you recognize this chart, I like to show that all the time because it's very powerful. We have our corporate asset management framework behind the scene, that's why it's faded, but all the other initiatives happening around it. And we try to link up with them, right? So our mandate is to build now for the future, right? Getting into each of the different initiatives that are happening. And Mike will talk about the town hall low carbon design brief in a few minutes. So we try to link up with everything happening around us, natural assets projects, lots ongoing there, stormwater master plan, growth with working with planning, because as I mentioned, we are going to grow really fast in the next few years, and putting climate lens to all our capital projects. So one of the projects that I would like to mention here is a pilot that we just completed in the facilities group, where we, and Dustin mentioned that this morning, the guide for integrating climate change in asset management. So we use that guide as the platform, and we did a pilot project in the facilities group. because we already have a level of service framework, so we wanted to take the next step. How do you integrate climate change? And we did that. But again, the work is still ongoing. Like Samir mentioned, data is a big issue. So we'll keep working on that. So that's one of the things I would recommend is make sure you take a look at that guide, very powerful guide, very well developed, and use it, apply it to your level of service, because that's one of the requirements for the Ontario reg. The other thing that we've done this year is, and again, the team, we put our brain together. We in the budget cycle, everybody in the town that has a project need to fill a need assessment form. So what we've introduced this year, at the bottom you will see of the slide, circled in red, is we've added a few fields that when you initiate your project, your need assessment, you identify that. Give us an indication. How does your project impact climate change, both from an adaptation and mitigation perspective, and how does it help in energy saving, right? So that helped us to prioritize projects, because remember, climate change is at the top of the priority. So we had our capital project prioritization matrix that we use, and now we've included climate change in it. So our capital projects prioritization is built around our corporate asset management policy guiding principles, and also on our three components: asset risks, service risks, and corporate risks. And corporate risk is where climate change will come into play, but as well as from a vulnerability and risk assessment, how does it impact your asset conditions, and how does it impact your delivery of level of service, right? So we build that, and at the end we get a final score. So we've identified projects that have that climate change impact, right, from adaptation or mitigation, build that into our project prioritization. So that's one thing, is to have that lens to prioritize project, what projects should be funded and what could be deferred, right? So that's one thing, but we haven't stopped there. The second thing is that we take a look now, our team take a look at those projects, and now we highlight those projects that has those climate change impacts. And what we are going to be doing going forward is we're going to be reaching out to those project managers to make sure that when they talk to their consultant, when they initiate the project, they plan the projects, they're going to be talking about climate change. So we're going to help them, we're going to educate them, and we're going to be as well part of the team if they want us to be there, right? So we're going to let our resources work with these project managers and engineers to make sure that when they make decisions on those projects, don't let the cost stop you, don't let other things stop you, just do the right things, and then we'll see what are the options out there. So this is what's going to happen, and both from an adaptation and mitigation approach. So this slide here is a really powerful one that we've developed within the team in collaboration with facilities. And what it shows us within facilities, what is the approach we're going to take. So on the left-hand side is all the things that that feeds into our need analysis, right? The asset management planning, the capital projects that come up from the condition assessment from facilities, or new project that has to be done, expansions of buildings, the corporate energy management project that has been identifying projects, and one of them is the low carbon design brief, and of course, things that are happening within operations, right? Asset failures, wear and tear, and all that. Also climate change, vulnerability assessment, right? So that feeds into our facilities capital forecast. We call it a facilities capital plan, right? And that will be the 10-year type of planning, forecasting. And then from there, we will prioritize which one are more critical, build into our capital budget, implement those projects, monitor the savings or the impact on greenhouse gas emission or adaptation, and that goes into our revolving fund. So this is something that we have developed. We are halfway through it. We're still setting up that revolving fund, and which is a great thing that we are excited to work with. Now, having said that, doesn't mean the pilot that we've done with facilities we don't stop at facilities only. This is a pilot for facilities, and this will going to be replicated to the other asset types, asset classes. Same thing here for these plans. We're going to do the same thing for the other asset classes, also asset types. This slide is to take us back in time last year, flashback, when we talked about what the town is doing about integrating asset management and climate change. So this slide is exactly what I talked about last year. When do we make decisions? So there's a few situations that was happening. Some of the assets were at the end of the service life. We needed money to replace heat pumps and they are failing. And what do? Do we replace like for like? And then we saw that there is that project, low carbon design brief. So we said, okay, let's hold off and take a look at, let's do that low carbon design brief, bring everything back like this chart here, and let's make the decision. So at this point, I will pass it over to Michael Dean to take us through what happened after that, right? So over to you, Michael, and then I will take questions at the end. So I'll stop sharing my screen and I'll let Mike take over.
Okay, thanks, Dharmen. So I will now share my screen, and if I do this right, it will pop up on the same slide. All right. So can we all see the flashback 2019 slide? It's the, all right, cool. Okay, so I am, as Dharmen said, Michael Dean, the Senior Climate Change and Energy Planner for the town of Halton Hills. And I guess I'm just going to walk everyone through this project that we've been working on over the last year, the low carbon design brief for Town Hall. This is a really important project for us because it's really kind of a test case for a lot of these new ways that we're approaching our facilities, integrating asset management, integrating the facilities capital plan, integrating climate change all together. So, you know, not only is the town hall obviously a kind of fairly prominent facility for us, but it's also, you know, if this is successful, then this is a proof of concept for how we're going to approach all of our facilities. And we're currently working on similar kind of approach to both of our arenas with the team at Mayor's Megawatt Challenge in our life. So as Dharmen said, you know, we go back to 2019, we were just completing our corporate energy plan. We were looking at the town hall. The heat pumps we knew were reaching the end of their life, and they were starting to fail on us, and we had to replace them all. And we needed to have a plan in place for, you know, what are we going to do, right? This is a significant investment in the facility, and if we take the wrong approach, then it kind of locks us into a certain pathway that won't allow us to achieve our climate change goals. And so we needed to know, well, okay, so how do we kind of shift direction in order to make sure that we're moving in the right direction, right? And the idea here is that we want to be achieving our net zero target over time, right? We're not going to do it all in one shot. We're going to do it integrated year on year so that as assets fail, we replace them in a way that leads to our goal. So, sorry, back one. So the idea here was the low carbon design brief. The goal of the low carbon design brief is basically to develop a course of action and a set of cost estimates to achieve our net zero target for the facility over time by 2030, and to use that to revise our asset management plan and our capital plan for the facility so that it would align with this target that we're attempting to achieve. So we brought a consultant, Internet Energy Solutions, on board to carry out this project for us, and we set them a set of goals to achieve. Those were to achieve a 40% overall energy reduction in the facility in 5 years, and to achieve by 10 years, ideally sooner, a zero carbon building. We picked the Canadian Green Building Council's zero carbon building standard as the kind of model that we were aiming to achieve. Doesn't mean that we're necessarily going to go for that certification, but you need something as like a target to shoot for. So that's what we ended up looking at. So what was the process? We had them carry out a building energy model. So, you know, taking historical energy consumption data, taking information from you know, as-built designs and site visits to create a model of the building's energy consumption. We did a kind of initial sort of narrative strategy investigation, looking at like what are the kind of high-level pathways that we would then evaluate in more detail. Having established that we kind of established 4 pathways. One was essentially just, you know, what's the minimal kind of energy efficiency goals that we could achieve, low cost, positive internal rate of return kind of thing. Then we looked at, okay, what's going to actually get us to net zero? We came up with three ways to do that. One was geothermal system. One was to implement a variable refrigerant flow system throughout the building, and the other one was to kind of combine the geothermal and the variable refrigerant flow system in a kind of total overhaul. We then carried out a detailed evaluation of each of those pathways. We had the consultants conduct some parametric modeling, and optimization analysis, conduct cost estimates for each of the pathways. We had Class C cost estimates done, which is really important to get that kind of level of detail and confidence in what the actual cost for this stuff is going to be. And then based on that, we selected a preferred pathway. And, you know, this selection of a preferred pathway is actually kind of an interesting story because, you know, there's a number of factors that go into this, right? The factors that obviously the leading factor that we wanted to analyze is achieving net zero carbon over time. So that was kind of the non-negotiable. It had to achieve that goal. So that kind of rejected the, you know, first pathway, the optimized energy efficiency pathway, because it wouldn't achieve that goal. The other 3 did achieve that goal. And in fact, the one that we ended up selecting, pathway 2, which I'll talk about in a minute, wasn't actually the most cost-effective strategy, but we ended up selecting it because the other 2 involved a much more aggressive intervention in the building itself. You know, in order to get the variable refrigerant flow in place, we would have to really take out the existing HVAC system completely, and it was felt that this was too logistically complicated and it just wouldn't be possible to do within the time frame that we required, right? And so we simply had to reject those on logistical grounds, rather than, you know, anything having to do with their energy performance or carbon outcomes. And then we've completed this report, and we're going to council next Monday to kind of, hopefully they say, okay, good, we'll go on with it. Otherwise, I'll have to reevaluate the content of this presentation. So just real quick, just to give you an example of
Mike, can you go on presentation mode?
Am I not in presentation mode? It's not showing up as, here, let me try one more. Let me try one thing. Does that show up as presentation mode?
Yeah, that's good.
Oh,
thank you.
Sorry. Okay, so just a quick example of kind of the analysis that we had the consultants do. This is an example of the kind of optimization analysis. So what this shows is an evaluation of all the various different potential configurations of window retrofits for the facility. You know, different types of windows, replacing some windows with you know, double glazed, some with triple glazed, all of those different configurations of which windows to be replaced with which technology. And you can see all those kind of hatched out X's on the screen are all the kind of iterations of that were evaluated and rejected. And then the red ones are the kind of best case scenario ones. And we were able to pick the configuration that achieves the greatest balance between carbon reductions and cost, right? So it's the cheapest, the highest carbon reductions for the lowest cost, or like, right there in the middle of those two. And we're able to do that for every potential measure that we evaluated and come up with, okay, this is the best, this is the lowest cost approach to achieve the carbon goals that we're aiming for, right? So that's kind of a really powerful tool, because obviously, there's hundreds of possible configurations that have been evaluated here, and we've arrived at, essentially the best one. So where do we end up here? We end up with, what we've chosen as the pathway that we're gonna pursue, and it looks like integrating a geothermal exchange system into the existing heat pumps, replacing the makeup air units, replacing all the existing heat pumps. This is a project that we're going to be doing next year, with heat pumps basically that can integrate with the geothermal. So that's the key consideration here is, when we buy these heat pumps, we'll make sure that they'll work with this future system that we'll be putting in place. Replace all the existing windows, install a building automation system, and alongside that building automation system, we're going to be looking at ways to integrate occupancy sensors throughout the building, so that we can tell in any given zone how many people are actually in there at any given time, and adjust the ventilation rates to match that. Much more efficient than a kind of CO2 sensor-based system. It works a lot faster than that, and it'll allow us to reduce our ventilation loads significantly, even given the increased ventilation requirements under like new protocols for COVID and whatnot. We'll still be saving energy for ventilation under this system. And then installing a carport-based PV system, and conducting some other measures like lighting retrofits and plug load optimization in equipment. The idea is to front load all the energy efficiency stuff over the next 5 years, and then in the 5 years to follow, to implement the renewable energy systems to get us to zero carbon. So just looking at, the geothermal system that we put in place, that we're going to be installing, allows us to achieve full electrification of the site, which is the most direct pathway to achieving the GHG reductions that we want to achieve. It allows us to use the existing heat pumps, as long as we replace them all, or use the existing heat pump loop, replacing the actual heat pumps themselves with geothermal compatible units. And we have land available on the site to do this geothermal, so we don't have to, dig under the building or whatever. We can just put it in the parking lot or the lands around. The building automation system, as I said, we were already planning to do that, to implement a building automation system, and we're just integrating it with the existing systems and making it possible to integrate with the future systems that we're anticipating putting in place. We're looking at a carport PV system. This is what the existing parking lot looks like at the town hall. We're actually replacing the parking lot, resurfacing it, so that'll allow us to better configure the lanes in such a way that we can maximize solar generation potential on the site. So that's an interesting kind of bonus that we discovered after all these renderings had been completed. So these don't look like what it'll actually look like, but nonetheless. And then with all that, what we end up with is the cost of this pathway ended up looking like something along the lines of an additional $3.7 million in capital projects to implement this project. We were able to integrate with existing or already forecasted capital projects for the facility and save ourselves essentially just over $1 million in costs. This might change. We might actually do better than this, because we're going to resize our makeup air unit, and there's a couple other synergies that we might be able to achieve that'll reduce costs. But you can see that just by doing this integration with our existing building condition assessments, our existing capital forecasts, our existing planned projects, we were able to reduce the overall cost of this project quite significantly. I mean, obviously, it's still a pretty, it's a considerable cost to do this. Part of the kind of change in thinking that we're trying to implement is that, it's not the lowest cost option, it's the lowest cost option to achieve our carbon reduction goals, right? So, obviously we could reject the carbon reduction goals and not achieve those goals and save a lot more money. But, if we're considering this a key goal that the organization is striving to achieve, then that's non-negotiable. We have to achieve that outcome. And so the goal is, how do we achieve that outcome in the lowest cost way possible? And this is, we think, a very powerful approach to doing that. So the goal here is to start implement, or, after this, after we bring this to council, if it's successful as an approach, we would be seeking to start implementing next year with a bunch of projects, the BAS system, the heat pump replacement, among others, and then looking to build these low carbon design briefs for each of our facilities, so that for each facility we have a plan. This year we're doing this to achieve our end goal. This is how it integrates with our capital forecast and our project schedules. So that's everything. Thank you. Oh, I'll go to the last slide. There you go.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that very detailed and very useful presentation. I know we've had a lot of questions, particularly out of day one, around what is this low carbon design brief and what does this look like? And they conceptually it was, okay, it's the endpoint for the building, but how do we go about doing that? So I think that was very, very useful for people. Of course, we've already had questions. Can you share this? So I'm not sure what portions you can share beyond what you've done so far, maybe digging a little deeper in the future. We can think about that. If anyone has any specific questions about anything that Dharmen or Michael spoke to us about. Our Q&A box is very quiet today, so I think you've given people a lot to think about. We'll probably have the questions formulating over time, and that will probably come up soon. But please, anyone, if you have any questions.
Just quickly to mention, we will, I mean, I'm sure we'll share the low carbon design brief final report. It'll be on our site, and we'll share it, widely, so folks can see how this actually, what one of these looks like and how it works. And so, I mean.
That's great.
Yeah, I guess a question for you. What was one of the key things you wish you knew going in that you now know coming out?
Of the low carbon design brief process. Probably would have brought the finance team into the project a little earlier. We kind of completed the project and then brought the results of it to them and said, hey, this is what we're doing. And we were already pretty late in the budget cycle for this year. We would have missed it completely if it weren't for COVID kind of delaying that process. But we were pretty late in the budget process when we started to talk to finance about this, and it kind of, I think, caught them a little bit by surprise, and it was a bit of a scramble to try to integrate, what they're saying with what we're saying. So it probably would have been a better idea to get them involved from the start. And that's our we talk a lot about trying to integrate the different departments and bringing them all into these processes, and I guess we slightly dropped the ball on that one, but yeah, that would probably have been made our lives a little easier.
Right, because we are hearing time and time again how important it is to engage everyone at the beginning, but no one's really done this before, right? So it's not like you should have known, but now you've learned, and when you go through this process again, you kind of already figured out the best approach that you'd like to take. So that's really, really great. And I'm sure everyone has all these same questions going through their mind. How am I going to go about doing this in my own municipality? And I think this has really given them a great guide anyway as to how to approach this.
I think what's really interesting, what's always struck us at the town of Halton Hills is your sort of collaborative approach to decision making that existed even before you were considering climate change. Do you want to talk a little bit about how that factors into both, I guess, to Dharmen's presentation and also the decision to go with a low carbon design brief, Mike?
Sure, I could talk about it a little bit. Maybe Dharmen will have something to add. I mean, I think one advantage Halton Hills has, being a sort of a fairly small organization, is that it's fairly easy. I mean, less easy now, but it used to be possible for me to just go down the hall and talk to our facilities people, you know, or maybe it's a short drive. And it's a fairly small team, so we all know each other, you know, really well and work very closely together all the time, which I think, you know, helps with these types of processes. You know, and we've had a corporate energy management team in place for a long time, and folks that, you know, were at the organization before I joined had done the kind of heavy lifting of building those networks and those relationships, so that I think there's a lot of trust with these types of processes. So, you know, that's very crucial, I think, is to you know, build those relationships so that we're all kind of pulling in the same direction as much as possible. I mean, you know, obviously there's some differences of opinion about how we can achieve these goals, but, you know, for the most part, I think we're able to work very well collaboratively to build these kind of outcomes and get you know, kind of try to build the sense of, I guess, ownership of these kind of processes across the organization. So it's not just, you know, the climate change and asset management group or just the facilities group, but we're all kind of in it together trying to achieve the desired outcome.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, yeah. So one thing is the size. The other thing is we need to really, and I talked about that, and it's about culture and leadership, right? So we know leadership, and the big question I kept being asked is how leadership build the culture, or does culture build the leadership? Right, so it goes both ways, right? And I think at Halton Hills, what we have is at every level of the organization, we have that leadership in the people. They understand it, they absorb the new approaches, and so yeah, we have council supporting it. That's one, and it's a hierarchy of leadership that we need to think about to build that culture. And if at one level it fails, that's where you're going to hit the wall, right, to collaborate effectively. One of the thing also is, I think the biggest challenge will be we are going through a huge change of people, right? People are retiring, and then new people coming on board. So we need to keep constantly bringing everybody up to speed, that awareness, that education, so that they understand what's in it for me and how do I fit in? How do I fit in? So my advice to everyone is, for Halton Hills, what we've seen is don't focus too much on the tools, the strategies, the plans, the technologies. They will get you somewhere, but to a certain level, and then you will plateau. So what will make you take the next step from, like what's his name, Colin says, good to great, to make that next step, that leap, is focus on the people, right? At some point you have to focus on the people. I know it's not an easy thing. It's easy to implement tools and strategies and technology, software, but when we make people change the way they behave, I think that's where you will. And we focus a lot of that. We focus a lot on education, meetings, make people understand, and because they are, at the end of the day, the one who will make it happen. It's not me, it's not Mike, it's not anybody else, it's everybody together, right? So
that's great. Thank you very much. I think we have a question here in the chat box as well, and appreciate your answer on, certainly people have been at the center of a lot of these presentations today, which really appreciate that. So from someone, there's a question about energy performance contracting as a financial tool that would support municipalities, deep energy retrofits, and zero carbon position buildings. Is this one that you're looking at?
Um, Short answer, yes. I mean, in a sort of, we're looking at potentially, you know, there's a couple ways, I guess, that we could implement this project. One would be to sort of treat each of these steps as one-off projects, right? We're replacing the heat pumps, we're installing the BAS, you know, somewhere down the line, we'll replace all the windows, we'll do the geothermal system, you know, et cetera, et cetera. We have these and we just look at them every year and implement them. So that may be the route that we take. Another possible model, I suppose, would be to contract with somebody who has the goal of, you know, this is the target we want you to reach. This is the pathway that we want you to follow. You know, you need to implement these projects, a geothermal system, a carport, PV, et cetera, et cetera. You know, now you're in charge essentially of taking us there. So I don't think we've gotten to the point of determining what approach we're gonna take necessarily, but I guess the goal overall is to keep that that desired end state in mind, and to try to hit the stages along the way to make sure we're still on track, and whether that's we do try to do that alone or we bring a partner on board, still to be determined.
Sorry, still muted. Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a great. Any other questions from the chat? Catherine, do you have any questions?
I think that pretty much covers it. It was really around the lessons learned, the big lessons learned coming out of it. But no, I think this was great. I'm gonna open this up to people if you have any questions over the next few days, because this has been quite a lot of information. We can process and digest the information, and you can come back to us with questions, and we can include that in the proceedings that we share at the end of the entire forum. And next week is day 3, when we'll be looking at financing mechanisms. So Town of Halton Hills should be interested in that one to see all the different possibilities for around financing, because again, that's along with making big organizational changes, financing continues to be a challenge. So definitely I'm wanting to explore that. But this was, yeah, all very, very fantastic information. And I'm sure we'll have questions going forward about how these projects are working out. So that's probably now a perfect segue into the remaining portion of our day here. So thank you again to Dharmen and Michael for your fantastic presentation on what you're doing at the Town of Halton Hills. And without further ado, we will jump into our awards. So these were the awards presented at our Mayor's Megawatt Challenge Forum last year. And so on day 1 of the forum, we presented the 10% savings awards, and those were presented to municipalities who achieved 10% savings in a particular building. And today we are presenting the leadership awards. So the leadership awards are presented to municipalities with high performance buildings, and high performance buildings are those that have met or exceeded the total energy target. And if you joined us for day 1, or if you're a member of the Mayor's Megawatt Challenge, you would be quite familiar with how we determine the total energy targets for an individual building. And the 2020 awards are for the previous performance year. So for meeting or exceeding the target in 2019, using 2019 data. So there we go. And our first award goes to the Town of Halton Hills. So congratulations to the town who are receiving 3 awards this year for 3 high-performing buildings. So in fact, the town's buildings overall performed so well that we had to apply a top decile target instead of our normal top quartile target. So applying the top decile target, and they're of course exceeding this target. So the first award is for Halton Hills Town Hall, and that was the building that Michael was just explaining about, that's going through the low carbon design brief. So it's already performing well below the target, and we're really excited to follow this building on their journey to net zero. And the second award is for the Town of Halton Hills Acton Arena. And it's actually the only ice rink facility in the database that's performing below its energy intensity target. So there's definitely a lot to be learned from this facility, particularly in relation to the net zero ice rink study. So lots to be learned in terms of operations and things that they're already doing in the building, as well as to what their plans are for this facility going forward. So congratulations on this one. And third award is for Cedar Vale Community Center. Again, it's the only community center without a rink or a pool in the database that's performing below its energy intensity target. So congratulations again to the town of Halton Hills for their continued leadership. And we look forward to seeing how much better these buildings are going to get going forward by 2030. So congratulations again. Okay, our next award goes to the Township of King, who are receiving 2 awards for high performing buildings. The first award is for Schaumburg Fire Hall. And again, the only fire station in the database that's performing below its energy intensity target. And you may recall this building also received an award on day 1 for achieving over 10% savings in 2019 versus the 2018 baseline. So I think there's a great case study to be had here in terms of what they're doing in this fire station that could apply. All of our members, of course, have at least one fire station or multiple. So I think there's lots to be learned from this facility here. And the second award for the Township of King goes to the Township Municipal Center. So it's a fairly new building, a beautiful building actually, with lots of bells and whistles, but nonetheless, it's performing well below its total energy performance target. So congratulations again to the Township of King. And the next award goes to the City of Toronto for Metro Hall, and it's a first-time award winner. So the City of Toronto has been participating in the program for a number of years. They're actually one of the founding members. And through a lot of hard work and determination, this building has finally achieved its total energy performance target. So we'd be really interested in learning more about what's been going on in this building and all the hard work they've done to take this building to below target, because at the beginning, when they first joined, it was quite far off. So with lots of hard work and lots to do, they finally got there. So congratulations to the City of Toronto. And the next award goes to the town of Caledon for their town hall, another first-time award winner. So the town's been participating in the mayor's program for a number of years as well. And again, through hard work and determination, they were able to achieve the target. So among many other strategies that they employed in the building, they made particular use of our electric baseload mini audit tool, which members who have been with us for a while will remember this tool. And it really helps municipalities to target areas that are using energy use excessively. So using the tool, the town was able to hone in on their HVAC system as using quite a lot of energy compared to HVAC systems in other town halls. And they implemented a retrofit project, which really helped them on the way to meeting this target. And many other municipalities who have won the award use that tool as well. So congratulations to the town of Caledon for all your hard work and exceeding your target. And the next award goes to the City of Richmond Hill for their City Hall. So this building is a multiple award winner. They've exceeded their target for a few years in a row now. And again, done lots of work to keep this building moving down the right path, as they've shown with their continued good performance. So congratulations again to the City of Richmond Hill. And the final award goes to the City of Mississauga for their Civic Center. So this building, again, is a multiple award winner, and they were the very first town hall or city hall to reach the target of 20 equivalent kilowatt hours per square foot by 2015. So many of you who've been with us for a while will remember the 20 by 15 Town Hall Challenge. And of course, the City of Mississauga was the winner of this Town Hall Challenge, being the first town or city hall to reach the target. And like I said, they met this back in 2015 and have been continuing to improve their performance ever since, and really meticulously shaving off equivalent kilowatt hours wherever they could. So they're working towards a new target was 15 equivalent kilowatt hours, but that may have changed given the aggressive new goals, but nonetheless, they are still continuing to improve in the building. So congratulations to the City of Mississauga and to all of our other award winners. So that was day 2. So we have our last day of the forum, day 3, coming up next week on November 25th. The registration information is down here at the bottom. Again, we've got a great lineup of speakers who will be available to talk about different financing mechanisms to achieve these very aggressive carbon reduction goals. Okay, so thanks very much, everyone. We're ending about 5 minutes early, but I will stay on the line if anyone has any questions that have come up that they'd like to enter into the chat box. If you have any questions about what you've heard today or the program in general or the upcoming event, please feel free to contact me.